So what's your story? Who the hell are you?
Oh, sure. Let's see.
Well,
So,
the running
yeah.
joke I use kind of on the podcast is, I have one listener. It's my mother. So
Okay. Yeah.
say hi, Sally, and tell Sally who you are.
Hey, Sally. No, so I'm Eric Glyman, co-founder and CEO of Ramp, but I'll tell you the real person life version. I was born and raised in Las Vegas, lived there for 18 years. Went to school out east. I studied economics and Mandarin, lived in China for a couple of years. And then, I've mostly been back in New York working and trying to build companies for most of the past decade. Um, probably at least why I'm on podcasts more now than I used to be is built a company called Ramp, and it's one of the fastest growing fintech companies. Really of the past decade. Um, you can almost think about it as a one stop shop, command and control center for every place that a company spends money and time. So you can tap a card. Card does your expense report for you. You can pay bill payments, even automate accounting. And so we serve about 30,000 businesses from early stage companies to any kind of industry to Shopify to Airbnb, you name it. And we've raised about $1 billion in equity and about 1,000 people, mostly based in New York, but can go any direction, whatever is most interesting.
And I heard you're here because you actually want to do business with energy
I do,
companies.
yeah.
Is that okay to say?
It is okay. I think it's great. I mean, I think uh, it's funny. I've been actually spending a lot more time in Texas in general. I grew up in the Southwest in Vegas and always kind of appreciated maybe parts of the country that a lot of my friends in New York don't, so to speak. But in many ways, I feel like the energy industry is almost at the center of, not just how the world is powered, but I think it's a central piece of the puzzle. If the folks who are working on AI on the West Coast are right, I mean, this is the place where it gets solved, or AI's potential is, doesn't really come true. There's an energy crisis. It seems like it's coming.
Yeah, I think Silicon Valley's kind of figured that out. You got Zuckerberg getting John Arnold on the board, and
Yeah.
you're seeing folks sign power deals with nuclear plants and
Yeah.
all that. So I think there is a growing realization. And I'm not anti-renewables in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I'm pro that. I think
Yeah.
we need all of it. But at the end of the day, I mean, life's just a lot better with energy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just really sucks if you're burning dung and wood in your house.
Yeah.
And so, okay, before we drill down into what Ramp does, because
Sure.
I want to get an accounting of that, just so the no pun intended, just so the
Oh, sure.
audience
Yeah.
audience knows what you do. Let's go to China first.
Yeah.
So you go to Harvard and you wind up spending time in China. What kind of drives that? And the reason I'm asking is
Yeah.
my oldest daughter has been to China multiple times because she was a Montessori kid. So she was always
Wow.
doing Model UN
Okay.
and loved China, has been over there multiple times. I've never been. My kids get to go places on my credit card, but not me. So what was the driver for China?
I mean, so some of it was like I growing up in Vegas. I remember it was like the mid 2000s, and all the big casinos were starting to open things up out there, and in Macau, not too far away in Singapore, and it seemed like at that time the new center of the economic world was moving out there. Um, and so I showed up to college in 2008. The Summer Olympics had just taken place, and I felt like, if I don't pick something up, I don't know what my future career would be like. And so I just wanted to learn something I could never learn at home, and started learning it. I went back. I went there for the first time. My parents were nervous about it, probably similar to I think many people. It's this communist place. You didn't know a whole lot about it. Turns out pretty nice, pretty welcoming, and was just in the middle of an economic boom. And I just got really interested in the place, the language, and all of it. And I guess what I'd say, Vegas was a pretty fast growing place to grow up. I think in 1990 they had about 500,000 people. By 2008, almost 2 million. I had never seen anywhere grow as quickly, as Beijing, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, some of the different economic centers. And so I just caught the bug, and I went back every summer. Worked out there. I was on a a Chinese game show at one point.
No way, really?
It's sort of
Do you have a clip of that?
yeah.
Oh, we definitely, Jacob. You got to go find the clip of that and throw it in the podcast.
We'll dig it up and send it to you. I mean, it's almost like a pastime of putting foreigners who speak Mandarin on TV.
Nice.
Which was fun, but no, that was it. It was, I actually thought I would, start my whole career out there, but the more I got to know it, the more, at least from a sense of, being a kid trying to find their way in a whole vocation, there's aspects of the culture that were very welcoming, but you couldn't really, unless you came from money or you were part of the government or something like that, it was very hard to actually start a business. And so I realized if I want to be an entrepreneur or work somewhere, I should probably, stay in the States. And so I came back and,
So do they view themselves as our mortal enemy and we're in this grand struggle for humanity and all that? Or is that kind of me just being a xenophobic Texan?
I think, in most parts of the world, most people are just good people,
Yeah.
good, honest, hardworking, just looking for a better life. And I think that's really true. I mean, getting to know and go to school with and meet people's parents and grandparents. I mean, some of what people went through in the 50s and 60s there was just awful. It really changed. 1978, after Mao Zedong passed away, the new leadership changed and it became a much more capitalist kind of a place. And in the course of just a single generation, you went from people who had very little at home to bikes, to refrigerators, to washing machines, to cars in one generation. And so in many ways, there were aspects of life that felt very familiar. Look, I do think that people who are leading the place have different goals than the United States. I think that's real. I think some of it is a different viewpoint of the world. I think some of it is just classic sticking to power. A lot of people there, I mean, at least conceptually, people in China think of themselves as a almost 2,000-year-old country. And if you study a lot of Chinese history, something that jumps out is whenever there's changes of power, a lot of people die, a lot of people pass away. And so I think some of it actually just comes from a desire to stay in power and a fear of what happens if they don't. And I think, unfortunately, we're on somewhat of a collision course. But
my two anecdotal opposite ends of the spectrum is it felt like kind of post Tiananmen Square that the Chinese government did become more responsive to the people. I mean, you had earthquakes happen and there was actually some level of what I would say is care in terms of looking out for people and not necessarily as callous as maybe previous governments would have been. Just a sense from kind of watching from Houston, Texas. The other end of the spectrum is my oldest daughter, blonde hair, blue eyes. Whenever she would go there, people would follow her around,
take photos,
her hair, take photos, and constantly had people in black suits with a black tie taking pictures of her, following her around.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's, people forget, I think people know, there's over 1 billion people who live there. And if you're in the cities, you see foreigners, but otherwise it's kind of rare. And maybe when she was in Beijing or Shanghai or wherever she was, there might have been millions of people there who were visiting for the first time. It was the one trip they'd take in their life to a major city. And so, it probably was very surprising to see someone like your daughter there. And,
she wound up getting a black ski cap, putting
just
it
to
on,
cover it up,
tucking her hair up underneath it, just to avoid that. The other thing that was interesting is she said there were days she couldn't breathe. Just the coal, the smoke, the coal, etc.
Yeah,
was that bad.
What years was she there?
Gosh, let's say 10 years ago. So let's kind of put it 2014 to 16. She's my child that dropped out of high school after her sophomore year and then went straight to college.
No kidding.
Yeah, on one of the so she's 22 now. She graduated college when she was 20, so she went to college when she was
Huh.
16. One of the reasons she went to college when she was 16 is she got caught drinking on the trip to China.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, I get the phone call from the principal of the school. I think there's a path forward for Charlie remaining in school. And I'm like, oh God, where's
Oh
this going? What
no.
is
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Got to remember picking her up from the airport and go, what the fuck were you thinking? What were you
Totally.
doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. And her great line was, well, Dad, it's not like they don't really enforce the law over there. I'm like, sweetie, you are the blonde hair, blue eyes person they would love to lock up
For sure.
forever.
Yeah, for sure.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But it's this really, it's kind of hard to explain if you haven't been there, right? Because like from the outside, and it seems like this intense kind of communist place that they're working 996, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week, in a kind of state-centered thing. But I mean, if you were there when your daughter was there, I mean, it just seemed like at the time it was inevitable that it was going to become kind of westernized, pro democracy. It was just kind of going that way. Um, in many ways, it was incredibly safe, and it actually felt more capitalist in many ways than the U.S. than the U.S. did. If companies, which are arms of the government, want to go and build a new power plant, reroute traffic, build a new part of town, they can move everybody and do it. Money could buy anything
Yeah.
at the time, and so I think there were a lot of people and Westerners who felt it wasn't such a big deal to be slightly outside of what the law said because money kind of spoke. And I think that what happened over the next few years surprised a lot of people who live there. You know, um, I mean, to kind of almost set the stage, like I think probably in 2012, 2013, there was probably 100,000 plus Americans at any given time studying there. Now it's on the order to 1 to 2,000. It's really shifted. Um, but I think Xi Jinping came to power. Uh, People knew that he was going to be a bit more traditional, but his daughter went to Harvard. The sons and
Do you
daughters.
know her?
I did know her.
Y'all overlapped?
Well, she's a few years younger than me, but it was this funny thing where I think Harvard took 4 to 9 students per year from China. Everyone knew Xi Jinping's daughter was at college. So that narrowed it down to about 4 people. And then if the next people say, well, I'm not Xi Jinping's daughter. I'm not Xi Jinping's daughter. You're not Xi and so she was under an assumed name at the time. But look, it was very natural and easy to think it would.
Okay, so I'm going through my head.
Yeah.
Do you ask her out on a date or not?
Oh, no.
You know what I mean? It's
Very
kinda
dangerous.
like half of me goes dangerous, but
Yeah.
man,
Yeah.
if I'm the son-in-law, I live like a king. I don't know. I'd have to think about that one.
It's
I wouldn't flirt with her.
Yeah.
It would be my intentions are honorable.
That's right.
Pure courting. Yeah.
That's right. Best behavior for sure. But it just happened in waves. She came back, kids of diplomats and officials had a few years to come back. I think probably nobody now feels that China is going to become a democracy, but probably 2014, 2016, that seemed like the way it was going.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, we let them into the World Trade Organizations, et cetera, all that stuff, thinking that it would work. Because I mean, if you look back at history, the Republican Party here in America will sit there and say Ronald Reagan was the greatest figure ever, and he won the Cold War, and there's probably an element of truth to that. But I mean, at the end of the day, what really potentially won the Cold War was buys Coca-Cola,
Yeah.
MTV.
Totally.
I mean,
Totally.
yeah. No, I mean, at the end of the day, everybody, every 18-year-old on the planet just wants to wear a pair of Levi's,
100%.
and have a car to be able to take the head cheerleader out on a date, so.
I mean, culture is, there's no other country in the world that has Hollywood. that
Yeah.
has Coca-Cola, that has, I think everybody kind of wanted to, be American. And it's still, I think, in many ways, one of the US's most powerful exports. Some sense as culture, maybe you can call it technology now too. But yeah, um, I think you're right. It did change a lot of things.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of tech, drill down onto Ramp in terms of what y'all actually do. And I will just to level set.
Yeah, sure.
I spent one summer in between first and second year of business school, an auditor at Ernst and Young,
Okay.
and we had paper ledgers that
Yep.
we would write notes on, and we had colored pencils, and we would draw. And so I'm sure you're doing much better with financial systems than those days. But what does Ramp do?
It's come a long way. I mean, look, so if you almost think about kind of the journey that financial services has been on for a long time, probably one of the first obvious differences between a Ramp and, let's say, an American Express or Concur, if you're like someone working at most companies, you're familiar with expense reports. It used to be kind of, you'd buy something, pen and paper, receipt, you deal with it. Then it went to the cloud. You could use Expensify or Concur, buy something, and you would detail and key in what you bought.
I
And
still remember the white sheets of paper with the receipts
Yep.
taped to them that had to be. Ultimately, we got high tech and we scanned them in.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Now, if you imagine the next logical progression, that's sort of our flagship product. Your expense policy is embedded into cards. So we issue smart cards out to companies. Companies can issue physical, virtual cards, whatever they want with their expense policies to anyone at the company. Employees can use the cards to buy what they need. And then Ramp automates the expense reports. We can pull receipts from an email. We can pull receipts from a vendor, or we can text you into receipts in your hand. So we take what's often it's the worst hour at the end of every month for people to go tag the receipt, scan it,
right.
detail what you bought to. That's done by a computer. We really kind of automatically do the expense reports for you. And that's what we started with back in 2020. We're, I think, probably now about 1 to 2% of all corporate and small business card spend in the US. And so it's grown really quickly through being a better way, but it's grown into we process bill payments for companies. So let's say you're paying for one or tens or thousands of invoices on behalf of a company, or procurement purchases. And effectively, we not only process the purchases, but take the receipts, the invoices, structure the data, and do companies' books for them, kind of detail what the purchases were. And so usually the reason that people are buying the software is it's often replacing what's feels like a lot of different tools, maybe an American Express or a Bill.com or a Coupa and Concur, and trying to stitch all these together to its one simple tool that you can use to manage all the spend that you're making for a company. And that's kind of the premise. Yeah.
So I'm the CFO. What happens? Am I paying for software then, or am I paying per transaction?
Yeah.
And then what kind of ROIs do I get on my spend?
Yeah, I'll start with that. So we did a study a couple of months ago with Forrester, and we helped the average company using Ramp cut their card expenses by about 5% per year. There's a few components. Some of this is, a strange way to think about it is, um, most people are functionally paid by Ramp to use it. We give you 1.5% cash back on your purchases. You pay it off every 30 days. We include software for expense management, bill payments. And so you can, instead of needing to go buy Concur or Expensify, other kind of tools you pay for by seat and by month, that's all kind of included and embedded. Um, we facilitate payments for you. And then on top of it, we do two things. One, we create software that shows you ways to spend less on things you're buying. So let's say that you buy a bunch of Salesforce licenses, or licenses to Zoom, something like that. You can do things like upload a contract, and we'll show you almost like what Zillow does for buying home. Here's what we estimate your home is worth. We can show you, here's the rate you were quoted. Here's what the rest of the market is paying. So it helps people negotiate for lower rates down. Let's say you then get a great rate on Salesforce, you buy it. We can then show you a couple months into it, you're paying for 30 seats, but only 20 people are logging in regularly.
So when I got fired, I had tons of time on my hand, right? And one of the things so I got fired, and one, I had a lot of time, and two, I was poor. I wasn't rich anymore.
Oh,
I was sitting there going through my American Express card bill.
yeah,
I mean, I just paid it at the end of the month, right? I
totally.
didn't know. So I'm going through it. Turns out 9 different Netflix accounts.
So
And I'm like, what the hell? I get
how did
all
that
the
happen? Yeah.
so the kids would forget the password, and they'd set up a new
Oh
an
no.
account
Yeah.
on Netflix, and they'd
Yeah.
forget to cancel it, right? I was paying for 3 subscriptions to The Economist,
Yep.
12 Hulu accounts, go through all of this sort of stuff. And sounds like if I'd have had Ramp,
Yeah.
if I'd had personal Ramp, I would have known that.
I mean, like, to be honest, like, you hit it, a lot of what we do. Um, you'd think your kids would be, looking out and try to be more helpful, but companies are crazier in some cases, right? Because like you have, tens to hundreds of salespeople, people operating, working on the business. You have someone working in finance who gets all the bills but has little context and invoices, and seeing 9 Netflix subscriptions, if they're in finance, maybe they'll notice that's the same vendor. You don't need so many. But we've seen companies that are paying for, I think probably the worst was 10 sets of product management software. Asana, Basecamp, Trello, Jira, Linear, things. All these competing sets of tools where the engineers tried one set of software, salespeople tried another, product management tried another. They picked the one or two or three that they wanted, and they're still paying for the rest. And so this kind of stuff happens actually all the time. Um,
Yeah.
and so we can show that to people.
And I don't know if the company version of this happens, but
Yeah,
Planet Fitness,
yeah,
I think you wind up with like 20 of those subscriptions, right? Because
totally.
you're
Yeah.
staying at a hotel somewhere, and the gym's like $30 at the hotel, and you're like, man, I'll just go to the Planet Fitness across the street because it's
Yep.
$10. You sign up, and then you forget to cancel, and then you do it again and again, and
And then they make it impossible to cancel too.
right,
And so this is also one of the favorite things. So we actually issue Ramp Visa credit cards, and because we're creating the technology, we're processing, approving, or denying the charges in real time. So you can actually build interesting add-ons. So you can do things like, say, this card that's in your wallet or in whoever you want on your company's wallet. You can say this works everywhere except for Planet Fitness.
nice,
So even if they get your number, they can't actually charge it. So
right,
you can surgically turn merchants off, or you can do the inverse. So let's say that you have a vendor that you do a lot of business with. Maybe it's a large ads account, and you want to make it such that only Google ads, if you're running ads, maybe you want a high limit, 50, 100,000, $1 million limit, but only Google can use that card. And so we actually create the abilities for companies to have much more surgical control over the physical and virtual cards they issue out. So those types of things. And I think like the last place where, and this is increasingly where a lot of the world is going, where we're saving a ton of time is, or creating a lot of value, is just time automation. Instead of it being it's an hour at the end of every month, you're doing expenses. It's being done in real time. It's a lot faster and easier. So we can shave an hour off for every employee to. Now we've seen so much transactional data, how so many companies have said Salesforce should this category in our general ledger. This vendor should be this category. This partner, who we've been doing business with for 20 years is always going to hit this. Ramp is able to predict, almost think of it as autocomplete for your accounting records, where everything goes. And so the job at the end of a month for someone, Ernst and Young or an
right.
outside accounting firm is not okay. It's a long list of transactions. Let me tag this, tag that. Start building automations to. It's more one of review, and so it gives. I would say for most finance teams, it's because there's so many point solutions. It's become a very tedious job for people over the past 20 years. We automate a lot of that away, so we think and hope they can work on much more strategic and interesting tasks, like not how do I label this transaction, but instead, Where are we creating value for the business? Where are we just like burning money? Mm,
How much of the
yeah,
way, because one of the things I've noticed in my career, and I'm a bit of a Luddite, I still do things on paper around here, but
sure, yeah.
the kids around here are always like, "Oh, it'd be so much more efficient. You do this in Notion." Not for me,
Hmm.
but so I get babysat around here. But one of the things, it sounds like you built a really really cool toy. How much in the way do you have to do of training companies so they'll actually?
Yeah.
I mean, is that a hard problem,
It's
or is it better these days because people are just young and they're used to doing everything on their phone?
I mean, I think, I mean, when I think about just like business to business software generally, B2B tools, it's been in this funny place because like I think over the past 20 years, people, even people who work at big companies, they're consumers too. You go home, you wear Nike shoes, use Instagram, Shopify, these like beautifully well designed, intuitive. You never had to learn how to use Instagram or Facebook or Spotify. It's just kind of easy, obvious, and self serve. And so we've tried to bring that to the expense side of things too. And so we pride ourselves off of, I think in our industry, we're known as like the easiest to use software. For most companies, it actually takes about an hour to get set up, issue new cards, switch over vendors, and you're done. I think if you have a super large company, like for like Airbnb, they had 10,000 people switch over. That took a little bit of training because we were turning things off. But for most people, there's no training. It's actually just pretty intuitive, and you tap a card and you get a text message and snap a photo of the receipt in your hand, and that's it. Um, and so there's just so much automation to kind of take care of this stuff.
I guess you're right. I mean, I've learned how to use my Morgan Stanley app,
Yeah, yeah.
and yeah, so maybe it is easier.
It's we always try to be and keep it pretty intuitive. And you're right. Like there's some new technology, you mentioned Notion and ChatGPT, where like you need to change how you work and work in this new and different way. And I don't really believe in that. I kind of believe it needs to be, dead simple, no tools
Right.
or, it's just what's the next thing and you're done and taking steps away. And I'm sure there's people who know how to change behavior. I don't know how to do it. And so
Yeah.
we just want to automate things. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun watching you come into energy, because here's kind of my take on the energy business.
Yeah. Talk to me.
It's this is the So we're a lottery ticket business, right? Because
Mm,
if you think about it, through no work on your part, you can get rich overnight. The
mm,
Saudis embargo oil and oil prices triple. I'm rich. I'm randomly drilling a well out here and I hit something I had no idea was there. I am rich.
mm.
And so anything that allows you to have another lottery ticket, we are so good at. I mean, the highest tech thing on the planet is you go out to Exxon right now, you can go into the room where they're literally geosteering, drilling an offshore well down in Ghana, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's as high tech as it comes. I'll put anything
Wow.
that Silicon Valley's doing, up against that. That being said, they probably still have paper ledgers there, because paper ledgers, if you automate them, they save nickel and dimes. They don't give you a lottery ticket.
Yeah.
And because when times are really bad, when
Mm,
oil prices are really low, you don't have the cash to automate things and do nickels and dimes sort of stuff. So that's going to be what you're going to be up against when you start messing around with energy companies. You got to convince somebody who just gets rich through no fault of their own
yeah.
that they can worry about nickels and dimes. Now, I think the thing you have going
Mm,
for you, and why maybe that's changed, is minus $37 oil. We had a good run of really low prices where it was like, oh crap, stuff actually matters.
yeah.
And then I think old guys like me are just dying. So the crew
I don't think
change,
so. Come on. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
crew change is happening. The crew change is happening, but it's a weird dynamic to go sell into. So it'll be interesting, like in 6 months or a year, if we do this again, to hear what you're seeing on that front. And I may just be totally off base, but that's at least my take on it.
It's been the more like Ramp has grown, I've tried to get deeper in the world, but I've been like trying to read and get close with I don't know, people who built amazing businesses over the years. And I was struck uh, reading and listening to um, stories about John Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, a lot of these old kind of like industrial energy
Right.
titans, you name it. And this theme kept coming up over and over, which is that, revenue and economic cycles are cyclical, but cost structures are fixed.
Right.
Yeah, and they they made their businesses, and some others of their competitors lost their shirts. Um, uh, Obviously, everyone did great in the boom times, but bust cycles were real. It happened consistently, and you could bet on it if you waited over kind of 10 years. And at least I don't know if they're right, but at least they like to think and express it
Right.
in their biographies
Right.
that their kind of control over costs of making sure nothing was wasted is what allowed them to get through some of the busts. And I think for us, like you're right. Like there's no aspect of Ramp's business today which is focused on, helping businesses, um, drive revenue or growth or any of that kind of side of things. But we do try to obsess on, um, for anyone who's buying Ramp and using it, we want to pay you to use it. We want the ROI to be clear as day, and to be a tool to cut costs to make sure there's any waste kind of going out. Um, because you're right. Whoever was on that plot of land before the oil was struck probably really
Yeah.
regrets not holding on to it. And so,
Right.
we have to figure it out. I don't know. Like what advice would you give as you kind of think about, um, people like me who, understand we do business with folks in the energy sector and field, but I wouldn't say I'm a native around it. I'm trying to learn. What's your crash course? How do you, what do you think
How to,
we
oh
should
my
know?
gosh, I could take that. I could take that anyway. No, I think one of the things you'll find about the energy business that
Mm,
may be different than other ones, and Houston's kind of the hub of it. So
yeah.
I think you'll get this vibe being here is we honestly don't have a class structure. Other
Yeah.
cities you go to, it matters who your father was. I heard something last weekend about Houston that I think summarizes this. Houston's where you don't have to wait in line,
It's cool. That's
and
cool.
why that is because if you think about the energy business, you basically take all your money, you drill a well, and then you turn it on and see what you've got, right?
Hmm.
And you sit there and you look up and go, "Oh, well, that really sucked. I'm broke," or "Wow, I'm rich." And so what'll happen is
Huh.
the CEO of an oil and gas company's best friend is inevitably the janitor.
Yeah.
And when times are going great, CEO's got a private plane. He's flying around. He and the janitor are flying around going to see Metallica, in concert because they want to. And then when times are bad, CEO's sleeping on the janitor's couch, and
Yeah.
that's just how it is. And he or she's gonna go start another oil and gas company, and all. And so you get this just kind of crazy kind of no one can be better than anyone else
It's
here because it's
awesome.
like
Yeah.
we've all been broke,
Yeah.
and all this. I mean, I was very publicly fired and mocked and humiliated on Twitter for it. Like, yeah, whatever. That was Monday. So one of those things. So you'll very much have that vibe when
Huh.
you come here. The other thing I'll make fun of Colin for this. Colin McClellan,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
CEO of Digital Wildcatters. Colin likes to talk about how great venture is, and entrepreneurial it is, and private equity and energy's all stuffy and sort of stuff. And I remember one time we were talking, something I go, dude, I cut $100 million check for acreage and then we go drill a well. That's pretty freaking entrepreneurial, man. I
Yeah.
mean, if you want to, so you'll have just wild-eyed optimists here, very entrepreneurial people. Everyone's down the earth. You'll literally be able to get into anyone's office you want.
Wow.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy. So you don't have to worry about, oh, my dad's here, or I'm a member of this country club or whatever. It's just Houston. So that'll be cool.
It's it's funny. I mean, growing up in Las Vegas, I remember as a kid thinking if the building was 20 years old, that was about as old as it could be.
I know. I
Like,
know.
it just felt ancient. And
We do that in Houston too. If a building's been around 25 years, we just tear it down and build a new one.
Yeah. It's, you got to get rid of it. I mean, I think there's something just like refreshing and different. And I don't, to be honest with you, I didn't really appreciate it or understand how weird that worldview was until you like go to, Boston and people are wondering where your, grandparents sat on the Mayflower.
That's exactly. What side of Capitol Street do you live on?
Exactly.
It's like,
crazy.
Exactly. I think definitely the East Coast very much has that. I think there are definitely elements of that sort of on the West Coast. I mean, obviously Silicon Valley is very entrepreneurial, but there's a little bit of a class structure there, I think.
Yeah.
And
I agree with you.
I jokingly think I have more in common with the Australians I hung out with this summer than I do my two coasts here.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the vibe you'll definitely get from Texas.
Huh.
So it'll be interesting. So okay, so we do this podcast again in like 5 years.
Yeah.
Tell me what we'll be talking about in 5 years that no one's talking about now. And maybe that's stuff that keeps you up at night. Maybe that's stuff you think you're going to be pushing into. And I'll even go first on this so you can think a little bit.
Interesting. Yeah.
I tell everybody, if you're not screwing around at a minimum with ChatGPT or Grok or one of these things, you're going to be left behind.
It's crazy.
It really is. We're going to overestimate the potential in the short term like we do with every technology, but way underestimate the technology over the long term.
Yeah.
It's really going to be a game changer there.
Chuck, how are you using it?
So actually, this is the wildest thing. So here at Digital Wildcatters, we've been podcast bros and we wear our hats backwards and stuff. And we've literally taken all our energy content, trained an energy language model on it. Now we're building AI apps for software companies.
No kidding.
Oh, it's crazy.
No kidding.
We've got an installation at NOV. We've got an installation over at ProFrac. I had the head of AI for Intel on my podcast, and we were sitting around chatting, and we were talking about RAG models and all this.
Yeah.
Great dude. But after the podcast, he's like, how do you know about a RAG model? We didn't know that anybody outside of Silicon Valley knew about it. And so it's kind of wild. We've been doing some bleeding edge stuff around here. Yeah. So the running joke is I talk old guy. Yeah. So anytime we're going to meet with a company, it's Colin will go find the champion within the organization that's usually a 32-year-old production engineer or something like that. Yeah. And then I got to go talk to the old CEO guy and say, this is going to be okay. Yeah. Trust me, your data's staying on your computer.
Exactly.
But and I think what we've seen, at least in energy, what we've seen is the use case that gets paid for today is just really advanced search. Like our installation, one of our installation that's in, we got 20,000 documents that have to do with safety stuff. And safety is just the most massive Jenga puzzle on the planet, because if this part comes out and it's too old, then it's got to be replaced by that. And if you do that, then you have to do this. And that would take engineers like literally a week to go figure out all that stuff. Well, the AI model can do it in 30 seconds.
Totally.
And the other big important thing we're seeing too is you got to show your work on that so that somebody can go check it. Because they're not going to trust your answer. So I think that's the use case we're seeing is just being able to search data and kind of have simple rules to put in effect. Own personal use, I use Perplexity a lot.
Yeah, for sure. They're great.
I mean, if you would have asked me a year ago, Google's the greatest website. And I'm like, Google sucks.
It's not good.
Compared to Perplexity. So. You were getting Perplexity last night. Who's this dude? Coming on the podcast.
Likewise, but I feel like I know you because Perplexity works quite well. Like it's no, you're totally right. So I give you my funny kind of backstory on some of this, and I'll go into the question of what's going to be super different in 5 years. But so Ramp is the second startup that I worked on. The first one. We started it in 2014, so about a decade ago, and I really think it probably was an AI agent company.
Okay.
The premise of it was pretty simple, and I'll describe it. So the idea was, let's say that you bought a TV at Best Buy, something like that online, and the next week after you buy it, it goes on sale. Best Buy would guarantee you could get that $100 back or whatever the price difference was if you asked them. So we built it was an app that automatically got it for you. So you
Oh,
installed it
cool.
in your Gmail or
So
Yahoo or
I
whatever.
remember the commercial. The little kid walks in with the ad and
Yeah,
says, "I just saw this," and the guy gives him the money. Oh, there
yeah.
you go.
So
Okay.
it was an AI agent that did it. So you would basically like sign up, you would link your Gmail account, and that was it. Okay, so and it was called Paribus, and it would go, you know, check for purchases from stores that it worked with. Uh, we would then structure the information and see, okay, Chuck bought this TV at Best Buy, it's $1,000. Check the website every day. Um, if the price dropped and you were eligible for a refund and it structured the policy, we would write an email as you to Best Buy asking for $100 back. And you would wake up the next day and look in your email and you'd see a response from Best Buy saying you've been refunded for $100 and we charged a cut. So it was actually this kind of simple agent-based model. It had kind of a simple set of duties you allowed it to do, and we launched this thing. Within a year, we had almost 1 million people using it,
Oh, nice.
and we filed for price drop refunds, for late shipment guarantee refunds, all kinds of stuff, and it worked and it scaled well. Um, we ended up selling it to Capital One. It's still there. We kind of talk about it, but it's been funny living now and 10 years later, 2024, and people are talking about AI agents as this new form of technology that is going to become very present. Maybe you'll have AI lawyers, people, digital lawyers that will be fiduciaries to you and represent you digitally. AI accountants, AI salespeople. These are all things that people in the valley and the technology industry are working really hard on. I think Microsoft had their big release today where it's not supposed to be a co-pilot, but actually be an agent for you. And
Skippy 2.0 or
exactly.
whatever Benioff called
Flippy's
it.
back.
Yeah.
It's we'll see if it works or not, but a lot of smart people think so. And I think that the where people's minds are in Silicon Valley, I think truly is, you know, software in some sense is writing these kind of custom workflows, getting someone to pay you 15, 20, $100 per month or whatever, and someone is doing the work. And I think what a lot of people are trying to figure out is, uh, can we sell work? Can you actually sell the outcome that people are trying to drive? Um, and it's interesting. I think in some sense, it's always been somewhat possible. It wasn't really a job to be filing for price drop refunds. It's too narrow. It's
Right.
too specific. Um, but suddenly, if intelligence is getting cheaper and cheaper, there are actual functions and parts of companies that you might be able to sell, not just the hourly rate, but the actual outcome. And so, I think that probably in some sense, if we're back in Houston 5 years later talking about it, if people are correct that the addressable market for software isn't just workflows, but actually the selling of work, um, I think we're going to be running out of energy to power
Give,
that.
give me
In,
give
in
me
some
give
sense.
me an
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
What would be an example of maybe a work that might be sold in 5 years?
So, we had talked kind of off mic at the beginning, but there's a lot of people, probably in some sense, um, advice 5 years ago would have been, if you want a job that you're always going to be safe in the future, you should be a software engineer.
Yeah.
And in a strange way, people are wondering, is that going to be the first automated job? Because if you're a software engineer, all your work is fully digital, um, all of it.
Right.
There's inputs and outputs that are affected, and there's a lot of very popular companies. Probably the fastest growing, I can tell you, so the fastest growing app that we see customers paying for now is a company called Cursor, which is infrastructure for software engineers to ship code faster. It's basically autocomplete for code. The short term view is that it helps engineers be, 2, 3, 5, 10 times as productive. You can write a lot more code and ship a lot more apps, which is really good. Um, there are also companies like Devin and Cognition and Factory AI and others where um, people are trying to create digital software engineers. And so you can actually just say, I'd like to build an iPhone app. Here are some of the functions that I want it to have, and go create. And just like a person would have, it's basically a large language model that has access to an internet browser, a code editor, access to, shell and to kind of your code base, and it's building
Somebody,
repos. Yeah.
I think, I think it was BP announced that they had reduced their developer force by 70%.
Yeah.
I mean, you're seeing that happen today.
Yeah. It's this funny thing where, you know, histor- the question is, do things behave the same as they used to? If you look like 30 years ago, when things were machine code and it was very hard to do, the number of software developers is maybe the size of a, thousandth or a hundredth of what it is now. Things get more abstract. You're not kind of writing and engineering right to the hardware. You're building software on top of it. It means that you need to write less code in order to do more things. In a strange way, it increased the demand for software developers. And the positive view of the story is, hey, if it gets easier to code, everyone can code, and there's going to be more coders than ever, and we're going to build more and more software sooner and faster. And I actually believe that over the next probably 2 to 5 years, there is some question of if reasoning continues to get better and better at the speed that it is, at some point, I mean, maybe it's a novelty. People can code and create different things, but I think there's some people wondering, will software engineering actually be the first job that is
Right.
automated, where it's sort of considered artisanal. Yeah,
Is
yeah.
there something in language models that led it to be so effective at software coding, or is it just it had Stack Overflow to train on? And
It's
so, you that's kind of what you fed it to train, and look at that, it got really good at it.
it's I think you nailed it, right? Like I think in some sense, um, the connection between input and output is so tight, and it's all digital and modelable. Um, I think the fun for a lot of software engineers is you're writing code, it doesn't work, and then you change one thing and suddenly it works. The code runs, and you feel kind of a rush, and then you move on to
Right.
the next line and go through that. In some sense, that's you're getting that feedback loop
Right.
right away that it's working. And so um, with a fully digital job like that, it's all digital. And so you can see the feedback loops, model it and create it. And so you can have kind of a digital version, a great model of what that world looks like. Whereas you look at physical robots, things today, where on paper a design can look really good, but it doesn't balance.
Falls
Things
over.
happen,
Yeah.
falls over, and so uh, in some sense, it almost implies that these truly very digital jobs, maybe the first, are more automatable, and maybe the hard physical labor jobs, uh, plumbing, electricity, pulling
Right.
oil out of the ground actually might be the safest in some sense from
Well,
automation.
this
Yeah.
is one other thing I gotta warn you about
Yeah.
in the energy business.
Mm,
Everybody in the energy business has made $1 million because they had a bit of information that nobody else had,
mm,
and they traded on it somehow, whether
huh,
that was, you know, I know there's something here and I was able to buy this lease before my neighbor found out, whatever.
huh.
And then if you look, we have all pissed away at least 10 to 15 times that amount of money
Mm,
because we didn't collaborate with our neighbor. And the big thing in the shale revolution has been figuring out how to space the well. So if
wow.
you've got this area to drill, they'll put 8 wells in it. They only put 6 wells
Mm,
because there's all this science that goes into draining it. And as weird as it sounds, in some places, because of the dynamics of the reservoir, it's not as simple as just these are straws in a milkshake. And if I
huh.
put too many straws in, I just spent too much money. And so maybe my economics are not good. Sometimes if you put too many straws in the milkshake, you can't get the milkshake out.
Fair
So
enough.
this was big, and wells get expensive. I mean, you're drilling a $10 million well, you could put 8 of them in this space. And so we spent 2 or 3 years just screwing up, spending so much money, losing so much money
Hmm.
because we all just wouldn't sit down and talk and go, hey, why don't we all just run this one test right
Yep.
here? We'll all kick in a little money. We'll see how it works. And then, instead of us all doing it independently. So there's this weird element of secrecy
Yeah.
and, hiding cards and,
Oh, sure.
playing poker that just doesn't exist. And you're going to find that odd. Because like on Stack Overflow, a Google engineer would go, hey, I'm having problems. And Microsoft go, oh, I wrote some code. Does this help you?
Totally. Things jump. Yeah.
And energy just doesn't have that vibe yet.
Huh.
And so you're going to find that weird. Like we'll get a beer after you've called on some energy companies. You'll be going, and that was so weird.
Yeah.
They just wouldn't. It's like,
call the guy down the street.
About freaking credit cards. And, there's no competitive advantage in that. So, But anyway, there's another thing you're going to look forward to in Houston.
It's so many different ways of doing business for sure. I don't know.
So do this real quick. We'll wrap up because I know you have better things to do to talk to me, and you were very cool to come on.
This is incredible. Yeah.
But all right, so everybody in the energy business wants to be an entrepreneur. They all want to start their own company. Give some advice because now you're on number 2.
Yeah.
And things people would love to hear about. What do they need to know about when it comes to fundraising? What do they need to know about actually starting a company? All that stuff.
Oh my gosh. So I'll give a couple of things. I mean, one, I think a lot of people's sense about fundraising is like I always love watching Shark Tank as much as anybody. Where you come on to the show, you're pitching, and you say, with this round of financing, I'll then be able to go on to the next step and go build this business. Would you please invest? And on TV, it happens sometimes. And in reality, you almost want to do the exact opposite. I don't know if Peter Thiel ever really said it, but I always overheard this story of he thought Airbnb was this perfect investment. And the reason was they didn't need his help at all. They didn't, they didn't need the money. The business would grow whether or not he was involved. They wanted to have him invest, and he was happy to do it. And I'm sure there was more to it than that. I'm sure there was uses of the capital, all those things they would have to kind of go and invest. But I actually think it's kind of a great metaphor for what raising venture is really like. By the time you're pitching investors,
it's totally I tell everybody it's a junior high dance. When one girl wants to dance with you, they all want to dance. They all want to dance. It's that one girl. You've got to get the one girl willing to dance with you.
That's it. And so in a weird way, my advice for raising money is just build a good business that people want to own.
It doesn't need it. Awesome.
But there's more interesting ways. I mean, I think what in my first business, there were a lot of things that were great and things I would never do again. Like with the very first business, you're terrified you're going to run out of money at all times. And the good parts of that is you learn the value of $1 an hour. You try to learn how to be kind of spendthrift and kind of spend things in ways where they're really useful. But when I look back after selling our first company, and I actually looked at like who made the thing really valuable. It wasn't the people that I hired for, closer to minimum wage or kind of just getting going. It was actually the really expensive hires. It was like the people I was nervous to hire. They were higher up on the payroll, more equity that we kind of gave away. In a strange way, kind of the most expensive people are the most valuable. They are the highest kind of ROI. And so probably the thing that I would say is important for anyone who's trying to hire and build and put together some company that other people want to invest in, almost think about it as like you're first trying to produce a movie before people made kind of Mission Impossible. You shoot a trailer, you get like the right people. Sure, it would have been good with certain actors, but it's better with Tom Cruise, I guess, or kind of different people. You want to think about like who you need ideally for the movie. How do you pull people together? And then when you're hiring, if you kind of hire from the general job market, you put out an ad, it's tough. You can interview people for 8 hours. You don't really know if they're good or not. 8 hours is a lot. Within 2 days of working with a person, you're going to have more experience actually working with them than you had over the course of the interview. And probably the best way to actually hire and have some unfair advantages, pick people who are way better than what people think, or something the market doesn't, is actually invest in long-term relationships before you're hiring people. Go back to people you've worked with for years, known for years, went to school with, college with, that kind of stuff. It's not like the proper way to hire where you kind of open a post and try to meet everybody, but you'll have a lot more information and can figure out who's a lot better than maybe what the market values them at. So you can start putting together a good team.
That was interesting. So I went to Rice University, and we
Yeah.
just historically always sucked at athletics, right? I mean,
Yeah.
our football team was always horrible, et cetera. We got really good though for a long while in baseball,
Yeah.
and that was all because we hired Wayne Graham.
Yeah.
And Wayne Graham's thesis on how to deal with his team, you ride the ass of your superstars,
Yep.
because he always said, some guy that's just kind of okay, he's trying as hard as he can because he's going to get cut from the team, and I won't give it a second thought.
Yep.
The superstar, even getting 5% more out of the superstar
Yeah.
and staying on him, is material to the team.
Yeah.
It makes the team that much better. So to your point, go get your superstars, and that's where the ROI is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so for sure. And also I think it's one of those things too where like the superstar is like pushing it and giving it their all. And like, I think people who are on the team kind of want to rise to it,
Yeah.
stay on the team. And I agree. And the last thing I'll say, I actually don't know if it's applicable. Now I'm thinking about the story that you're telling me about the way that Houston operates, but at least in the Valley, this is interesting. I would say that there's this funny saying of, if you go to somebody and you ask them for money, you're going to get advice.
Right.
And if you go and ask for advice, like maybe you'll get money at the end of it. When we were building Ramp, put together the team and going, we just simply say, hey, here's what we're trying to do. We're working on a card that's designed to help businesses spend less money, spend less time, not more. We know a couple things about saving. Um, this was our last business that we built on it. Are there places in your business you feel like you're spending too much money, or time? And we try to sort of flip around, sit on the same side of the table, and solve a problem together, and walk people through our progress and ask them for help on things. Some people said, thanks, get out of my office. Other people said,
Right.
here's where I'm spending too much money or time, and if you solve this, like I'd look at it and call me back in a month, let me know where you go, and just keep calling them back. And I'm not asking them for anything, I'm just giving them updates and whatever. Um, One data point becomes two, becomes three, and suddenly, 2 points is a line, three is a curve,
Right.
and it's kind of going up and to the right, so to speak. And before you know it, all investors often they have partners too. They have people they want to look smart in front of, and maybe you get your first bite. Someone says, "This is really interesting. I'd love to get involved. Can I put some money to work?" And you kind of figure it out a little bit, and you can call up the other people you're in touch with and say,
Right.
um, no pressure, but we're thinking about taking some capital. It's looking like it's here. We'd love to have you if you want, or if not, no stress. And then
It's
it
a
can,
lot more like dating.
yeah,
Fundraising is, I
it's the
always,
junior high dance. Yeah,
it's when, because so basically, I get booted, and I start a podcast because I like to hear myself speak, right?
yeah.
So I start doing that, and
Guess you
I,
and me
I
both.
also,
Yeah,
this was great. I had a buddy when I got fired, and he goes, "I don't want you to do anything for 6 months." I'm like, "Well, oil's at -37. I don't think there's a worry of that, but okay." And he said, "No, anytime you think of something, just text me, and I'll accumulate all these, and we'll go get a beer, and we'll go through all of them." And supposedly, the first thing I ever texted him was, "Under no scenario will I ever manage people again.
yep,
Just not going to do it." So anyway, I knew uh, Colin could publish my podcast, and he also couldn't tell me, if I want to say fuck, I'm going to say fuck. I'm going to
yeah,
do whatever. Uh, but anyway, I started coming into the office probably about 6 months later, just because coming into the office is probably better than sitting around day drinking. That
yeah,
probably wouldn't be the best thing for me. And so I've spent a long time, I've spent the last kind of 3.5 years hanging out here and stuff. And people are like, what do you do? I go, well, I take a nap on the couch, right? You know, I think we figured my title is actually Galactic Viceroy.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, and you know where that comes from? LinkedIn makes you put a title.
Totally.
Yeah. So I was like, unemployed dude would suck. So I put Galactic Viceroy, and I kept getting texts from people, congratulations on the new job. I'm like, whatever.
Pretty big role, a lot of responsibility. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I always tell Colin, you know, fundraising, it's about getting the next date.
Yeah.
It's you know, it's not, you're not going to convince anybody at any given meeting. You're not going to change their mind. Just get them to spend more time with you. Because at some point, if they keep spending time with you, they wind up liking you.
Yeah.
And that's when it's like, yeah, okay, we'll give you a check.
Yeah. No, and that's it. And, you know, at least for, you know, as the dollars of capital is going up and up and up, you know, they have partners too, people they need to look good in front of, and in some sense, and justify why are they going to part with their money for some illiquid, unknown thing. Maybe could come out
Some
of a computer
kid that
out of the
doesn't
ground.
shave,
exactly.
whatever the story is.
Exactly. And, you know, being like, you know, I've gotten to know this person over 6 months, a year. When I first met them, it looked like the progress looked like this. And, you know, now it's here's where they are, and wait another 6 months. It just, it helps justify in a competitive process why to get in. And so I don't know.
So do this on the close. Who do you want to talk to if listeners are out there and they've made it this long and I haven't bored them to death?
Yeah.
You've been fascinating. So they're
No,
still around.
yeah.
I've bored them to death, but
No.
so who do you want to talk to in terms of, is there a company size, company range? Is there generally an officer at the company you want to talk to? And then how do folks get in touch with you?
Oh yeah, for sure. Look, often, you know, we're most excited and we can be most helpful to two sets of people, maybe a chief financial officer, controller, or just a business owner. You know, someone who is trying to rein in costs, automate expense reports, you know, get rid of two tools people don't love, make it easier. Um, we love to spend time. You know, we help our average company, again, cut expenses by about 5% when you kind of look at card expenses and time, which is pretty material for a lot of small companies.
What does that 5% mean? If I'm spending $1 million, you're saying I'm going to spend $950 a month? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Especially on a card, that's typical. Look, sometimes it can be quite a bit more. You know, and I think really, you know, Ramp sometimes is adopted and brought in by all, you know, different types of employees, but usually it's someone who is interested in, you know, generating a little bit more profit at the end of the year. You know, and in terms of size, like, you know, it totally varies. Probably the largest deployments have, you know, 100,000 employees, you know, using it. But typically it can be a company with, you know, 200 to 800 people. It's just an easier tool to kind of manage expenses. And so if it's of interest, we'd love to help. We're just at www.ramp.com. And I'm just Eric at ramp.com, and be happy to help.
Cool. Dude, thanks for coming on.
Thanks a ton.
I'm also looking forward to dinner tonight.
Yeah,
So
I can't wait.
I heard we're getting steak. Welcome to Texas. We're going to eat steak.